I'm so pleased to introduce you to Tracey Chambers, CEO and co-founder of Taking Care of Business and Grow Centers. Tracey is a social entrepreneur who started out her professional life as a chartered accountant. She has 25 years experience in the corporate and social impact sector and is passionate about poverty eradication, early learning, and micro-enterprise business models. Before starting the clothing bank, which has recently been rebranded to Taking Care of Business, or TCB, and Grow Educare Centers, Tracey worked for the retail giant Woolworths SA as the head of financial planning and performance management. In 2010, Tracey founded TCB, an award-winning nonprofit organization. Their mission is to eradicate poverty in South African families by empowering the people raising the next generation. They do this by equipping aspiring entrepreneurs with the skills and resources they need to unlock their full potential and access the economy. Welcome, Tracey.
Thanks, Gabby. Great to be here.
So, Tracey, before we get started talking about your current work, tell us how and why you made a move from corporate finance. It sounds like there must be an interesting story there.
Well, like most people, I hit that precious age of between 39 and 40. I literally had it all. I had an amazing career, incredible company that I worked for. But I had this gnawing feeling inside that so I was put on this earth to do something more meaningful. You know, working for the corporate world, whilst very stimulating, you know, every year it's all about shareholder growth. And sometimes that comes with negative consequences, you know, for people, planet, all in the name of profit. And I'd done a lot of work really asking myself, you know, is this it? And with the help of a good therapist, he really helped me, you know, essentially ask that question in a very deep way. And so in 2008, I made the crazy decision to really jump off the corporate ladder with no plan. And that sounds really weird for an accountant. You think most accountants would have a clear plan, would have done a budget, and all the rest. No, not me. I literally jumped, really following my heart. Later followed my head, but really followed my heart and really trusting that the universe would show me the way and show me the way that I needed to make a difference and leave the legacy. You know, when I say leave a legacy, leave the world a better place. That's what I wanted to do. That's what I wanted to be on my epitaph, and figuring out what that was unfolded over time.
Excellent. Now, Tracey, you are a multi-award-winning social entrepreneur. What's your secret to success in balancing your social and financial objectives? We often hear how hard that is and really challenging for social entrepreneurs. And so I'm sure you've got a lot to share on it for us.
Yeah, I think, you know, all the awards, I think, is really irrelevant. I think what really matters is, are you making a difference? Can you see the change that you want to see in the world? That's really what keeps me going. And I always say, when I set out to start what is now Taking Care of Business, I knew what problem I wanted to solve. We wanted to solve unemployment for single mothers in South Africa. Single mothers, the prevalence of single mothers is extremely high. More than 60% of mothers in South Africa are single. You know, millions of women dependent on very small state grant. And I wanted to help those women eradicate poverty in their families and go on to create wealth without having to follow the formal job route, because for many of those women, it was not a possibility. She was knocking on those doors, but it wasn't a possibility. And the reason why I wanted to do that is because I had an incredible nanny at the time who was doing exactly that with my second-hand clothes. When I found my gorgeous nanny Beauty, she was selling avocados on the side of the road, and she was actually a natural trader. She became a widow in her 50s and had to do something to feed her family. She had no alternative. And I could just see all of these amazing beauties around me. And I wanted to essentially permeate what beauty knew how to do that so many women didn't know how to do. And whenever I talk about our work, it makes me cry. The word mother evokes an emotion in me. And I always say, if your why makes you cry, then you will find every single reason to get up in the morning. That doesn't mean that there are hard days, but you know why you're here. If your social mission is not coming from a deep place, the dark days will overshadow you, will literally knock you down, and you won't be able to get out of bed. But if you know why you're doing what you're doing, that's really what helps you balance. You will find a way through it. You will find a way through it. I think the other thing that certainly helps me is we are very impact focused. We're always measuring our impact, and getting those incredibly positive stories, or just data that really helps you understand in a deeper way how you can help, that is going to be more effective perhaps than the way you're doing things today. Always journeying towards a better and a deeper impact. That's extremely fulfilling. So like in the corporate world, you're always chasing profits, and everybody, especially the accountant, was looking at the bottom line. In my work, I'm chasing impact. And if you get impact first, the money will follow. And if you tell that impact story, the money will follow. And if you're really interested in the impact, like it's not just a byproduct, it's your core mission, the money will follow. And so that's what keeps me balancing, purpose and financials. The money has followed. We've been very fortunate, but that is because we are having impact, and we know we're having impact.
Excellent. That's great. And I must say, I've had the privilege of meeting some of the amazing women that you've worked with over the years, and they really are just inspiring, and the journeys that they've been on with your organization are just incredible. So thank you for that amazing work. And then, Tracey, you've already kind of started talking about impact and data. I mean, I know just from knowing you that you're a seasoned user of theory of change, is something specific that we talk about and use a lot as well, and using evidence to tell your impact story. Can you tell us a little bit more about your experience of these and how they've added value to TCB?
Yeah, I think when I started out on this journey, I had no idea what a social entrepreneur was. I had no idea what a theory of change was. These were all new terms to me. But I think coming from a structured corporate environment really helped me put these things in place almost by accident. Okay. So, when you're in a corporate environment, you're going to have a strategy. You're going to have a plan around how you're going to deliver on that strategy. And you're going to have key metrics that tell you whether you've achieved on that strategy. And for me, a theory of change is no different. I think the missing point often in a theory of change, and in the social sector, is that people come in already with the solution, and they forget number one, which is, what problem am I trying to solve? They've come up with I always say, ideas in the shower. This is a great idea, but is this really the problem? And is this really the solution that's going to solve this problem? So sometimes we have to dial it back. And I know that many times we got it wrong. We made too many of our own assumptions around, is this the true problem? Sometimes it's layered. It's multi-layered. When we started the clothing bank, we assumed that actually the biggest problem was a lack of business skills. Yes, it is a problem. But it's not the core, deep problem. We had to unpeel the onion to get to the true core of the problem. And in our case, what we discovered is so many women did not believe in their own agency.
Mm.
And once she believed in her own agency, the business was the easy part.
Mm.
So we were starting from the outside, you know, and not going deep enough. And once we started from the inside and got to the real core of the problem and developed all of our programmatic inputs around that, the real problem, we were able to deliver the change. So I think the key is to have the right starting point. And then ask yourself, well, what are you going to be able to change about the problem? So, you know, poverty is a wicked problem. It's very, very multidimensional and very, very complex, particularly, you know, intergenerational poverty. And your solution might only solve a component part of that. And I think when you have to unpack your theory of change, it helps you ask those questions. What can I realistically solve, perhaps with the solution that you've brought to the table? And then really, how are you going to measure whether this has actually changed, and your component of that versus other component? That can be very, very challenging to actually break that down into the component parts. But I think a theory of change, the actual process of a theory of change, thinking through what problem am I going to solve? What will it look like when I've solved that problem? What intervention do I need to put in place to solve that problem, or interventions to solve multiple problems? That for me is the most important component, because it really helps you challenge your own thinking. It's so much deeper than a business plan. You know, I think the other major challenge as social entrepreneurs is we are responsible so often, particularly when we're doing people change work, or even, you know, climate change work, is that our programs can only take people so far. Your change work, they have to do their change work. And where do you stop measuring? Do you know what I mean? What do you take accountability for to measure? You know, I always liken it to the corporate world. I can put healthy food on the shelves in Woolworths, which we did every day. Okay. But I take responsibility for people's health. You know, do I have to actually, in the social sector, we so often take full responsibility all the way down to, you know, I'm going to lower blood sugar levels or reduce diabetes, but the human that you're working with has to do that part of the work. And where does your change work start and stop is a really great process to go through in your theory of change thinking. So often we make quite lofty claims about our impact, and then we actually can't measure it because it's too far removed from the work that we do. And it can help you with a reality check. Otherwise, I think you can often set yourself up for, you know, for failure in a sense. We had to realize through the work that we did that I can't do the work for somebody. All I can do is give her the tools. We were doing so much to hold on to her because we had created our measures to be a factor of she needs to stay on the program and this needs to change in her life. And we were almost, in some cases, dragging her through the process because those were our KPIs. Once we realized that actually our KPIs need to stop at a point and then it's her journey, it helped us release individuals and release ourselves to say this is not within our control. So it's a very complex, multidimensional tool that can have so many benefits for your organization if you use it in a fluid way. I think the key with theory of change is that it's just a theory. It's a hypothesis. And you're going to test your hypothesis continuously. And you're only going to do that by taking action, getting a result, taking another action, getting a result, and eventually you will refine your hypothesis. We're still refining our hypothesis all of the time. Because these are complex issues that we're dealing with. And if you can see it as a learning tool, rather than, a stick or that you're going to beat yourself up with, or that your funders are going to hold you accountable for, but more of a learning tool. You'll see incredible value in it for yourselves.
Absolutely. That's really eloquently put, Tracey, in terms of just highlighting some of those things around hypothesis, the importance of testing, iterating, learning, being realistic about your sphere of control versus influence. Where does it begin and end? Just so much richness there. So thank you. And then following on from that, but a little bit more specifically, can you tell us a little bit about how you have leveraged your theory of change, or actually theories of change, because thinking about both TCB and Grow Educare centers. So leverage your theory of change and your impact story to really engage with and bring on investors or funders into those organizations.
First of all, I'm going to hijack your question a little bit and also talk about how we've leveraged our theory of change internally. I think that's not necessarily spoken about enough. The crux of building a great organization is to mobilize everybody around the same goal. Yeah. And your theory of change puts that on one page. And then you can align your staff and say, well, which part of the theory of change does your job influence? And that means you're taking, my why of why I started this organization and making it a component part of that, somebody else's why. They can see how they're working towards the bigger picture, even in a siloed role that doesn't necessarily get to touch all aspects of your organization. You can put KPIs that all lead to your theory of change down at an individual level, and objectives down at an individual level. So it really unites your organization around that. And I think so often the why can get watered down over the years. The legacy story doesn't get told. And so somebody who joins your organization 10 years later, or maybe even when the founder's gone, doesn't remember why we exist. And so it really helps you formulate it on one page. I think from an investor point of view, it really has been an education tool. You'll be surprised at how many investors don't even know about a theory of change, or have never really seen. They've maybe heard of the concept, but never really seen it used in an integral way in an organization or participated in one. We got our funders to participate in our theory of change that we've just recently redone. And that brings them closer to your core mission and your hypothesis of how you're going to change it. And when you're in that experimental phase and something doesn't go according to plan, you can refer back to that and essentially engage them in the conversation around that. So I think it gives funders confidence that you've got clarity. I think, there are still far too many of us who do not have absolute clarity. We are not able to put out into the world with absolute clarity what we do and why we do it and how we'll know whether we've actually achieved it. And when you can do that, funders are getting piles and piles of applications, and those vague general funding proposals, I've seen too many of them when I get to the end of page 15 and I go, what do they do actually? That's not going to win you funding. But when you can take you literally can talk through your theory of change from the lofty mission all the way down to impact measurement, and show that logical thinking, that logical mindset. That gives funders a lot of comfort. It also helps you say no to things. So, when I can see my theory of change on one page, it's so tempting to follow the money, okay? Because we all do need to pay the bills. And what it's really helped us with is, as an opportunity comes in, from the sidelines, we can say, does this fit within our theory of change? And it really helps you not to get distracted by those other peripheral things where there's money, but it actually doesn't serve your core mission. It helps you say no. And I think one thing we've really done in TCB is stick to our knitting, stick to what we're really good at, and stick to the things that we want to focus on in terms of how we think we're going to bring change to South African families. And our theory of change framework has allowed us to do that.
Excellent. That's great. And thanks so much for hijacking and talking about your team. It's really great. And I think certainly that's something that we see as well, just resonates so much in terms of the relational side. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all working with people, and that relational component, both internally and externally, and getting people on the same page is just so valuable and important. So that's really great.
And we found, I had a conversation with somebody the other day, said, but tell me what to do. And I said, I'm not going to tell you what to do. You can see where you fit in the theory of change. You can see the outcome that we're looking to achieve. Now you need to figure out how we're going to achieve that outcome. You're closer to the ground. You know what the system needs to achieve that outcome. And I'm going to judge your performance on whether we've achieved that outcome, and within that, you're fully empowered to do what you need to do to make that happen, and tell me, and let's learn along the way, with obviously those feedback loops, that this is an evolving process.
Yeah, that's another great point, just in terms of being able to highlight an outcome and then, empowering people within that, which I think often people feel that they're operating in straitjackets and that they're given kind of very tight directives on what they can and can't do. And I think, back to your point around when you're clear about what and how, etc., it just actually gives more freedom within that broader picture and system as well, which might seem counterintuitive, but
absolutely does. It makes people feel that they themselves have agency in this, that there's a level of innovation that's still open for them to discover what it takes to solve this particular problem or achieve that particular outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. And then Tracey, I mean, you've obviously, been working with this and other kinds of tools and processes, etc., for a long time, testing, trialing, probably discarding a lot, keeping some. I'm sure everybody would really benefit from hearing from you. What would be your go-to resources that you would recommend to assist others on their impact journey who might be kind of earlier on in the process?
Sure. I'm not a big researcher, I need to tell you that. I'm a doer.
Exactly.
I rely on wonderful consultancies like the Relative Group to be the experts on these things. But I think you can learn a lot from fellow social entrepreneurs. I love to see how others are doing it. And don't be afraid to go and ask others, can I see your theory of change? Tell me what you learned. Why haven't you got this? Those kind of questions have really helped me, and those are the types of things you can get through, going to practical workshops with fellow social entrepreneurs where there's case studies and you sharing knowledge. I think, pure theory, it's often hard to translate. You actually need to see working examples, and that's really, really helped us evolve. And, if I look back at our theory of change 10 years ago, and I go, oh my goodness, that was so rudimentary, how embarrassing. But that's okay. It's also like looking at your first annual report that you did back in 2010. It looked like a high school project, and that's okay. As long as you're evolving and growing and learning and getting better at it, there is no perfect theory of change. I think one of the hardest things, one of the really, really hard things, where we've made some mistakes over the years, is finding the right metrics.
Sure.
I think, so often it's easy to measure the input metrics, but keep asking yourself, so what change am I looking for, and how do I measure that change? And we started measuring so many things because we weren't really sure which one to pick. And as a result, we got this plethora of metrics, but none of them really, what was the one that we could say, yes, that is true impact. And we spent a lot of time searching for that metric. We made a lot of mistakes along the way. And I think the advice I would give is don't overmeasure. Don't overmeasure. Be selective. It might not be the perfect metric today, but be selective and select the measures that are going to give you the right readings. Because the whole point here is the feedback loop. It's not a report card. It's the feedback loop. So what is going to give you the right feedback throughout your process in the short, the medium, and the long term, that is a combination of inputs, outputs, and outcomes. Because you do need the input measures, because if you're giving the wrong inputs, you're going to get the wrong impact at the end of the day. So it's a complex, it's a set of levers, it's a set of levers, and you need to have a representation of all of the levers to get you to the root cause of where are you going wrong in terms of your hypothesis. But that doesn't mean you need 100 measures, because your organization can get bogged down by measurement, and then it doesn't have the time to actually do the analytics and actually read the measures. It's so busy measuring, and it's so fatigued by the actual results that it doesn't even bother to review it, because it's ticked and the job is done. So I would really caution people against that. And sometimes it'll take you a while to figure out which are those important measures. And once we found that, that really, really helped us, quickly get to the problem areas, and to then refine those. We don't, it's not a perfect science. It really isn't a perfect science. And we don't propose to have all the solutions. We're still figuring out quite a number of things, because as I said earlier, these are wicked problems. But at least we know we're on the right path. And our signals give us that signaling along the way. We'll know when we go off the path. We might not know which is the next path to follow, but we'll have a signal that will allow us to quickly pivot.
I love that language of signals. It's just so universal in terms of what it means, as it's really just, what's the light to tell you, start, stop, continue, change, etc. Which is just really practical and helpful. And one of the other things that I heard as well was just also around that, almost kind of organizing and thinking about what you're measuring at different levels as also a way. So when you were talking about the different levers, and so understanding your input measures versus your outcome, so you're not kind of drowning in information essentially, but you can actually make sense and have it in a format that's usable.
Absolutely,
because it's expensive, and I think as well.
It's expensive. It's very expensive, and even in a business. I mean, we're actually expected to measure so much more in a social enterprise than you are in a business. But in business, people ask, is this worth measuring? Or if I'm, in the retail space I was in, it was all about preserving the cold chain. The impact was longer shelf life. And so you had a number of signals. First of all, if you were having lots of waste on the floor, that was the end signal. Oh dear, waste is up. And then you had about 5 indicators that would then signal where things had gone wrong, that you could then probe and hopefully quickly get to the core of the issue. And it's understanding those levers and how to put those together. That's absolutely critical. The other thing, which I think is so interesting in the social space, In the corporate space, if you get a red indicator, there's no you might lose your job, but it's not that. That's not the first I failed. It's, okay, I need to do something about this. If you don't do something about it, over time, you probably will get fired. In the social space, because we take things so personally, and because we are, our why makes us cry, we're almost afraid to look at those signals when they're red. Because it's a reflection perhaps on us and our own, we judge it as personal failure. And that's one thing it took time, because if you're going to judge this as personal failure, then you're not going to look at the red signal. Or you're going to you're going to be crafty. Your ego will make you crafty, and you'll frame the red as a green. And you won't really stare in the mirror. You've actually got to put some distance between yourself and the metric and see it for what it is, and be able to not take it personally, for it to have true value to you. And that's hard when you're invested. This is not a job. This is your passion. You want to make a difference. That can be hard, and I think we don't often talk about that enough in this work. To say my theory of change is not working is a really hard thing to say, especially if you've come with a solution and you don't have another solution. Most people just keep trying to beat that solution, rather than really interrogating what the feedback loops are giving you and saying, maybe I was wrong. That's your moment of truth. That is your moment of truth, when you can actually say that and then be open to perhaps what the real solution should be. But it takes staring those numbers in the face sometimes.
Absolutely. It takes a lot of courage. Sounds like, absolutely. So huge pearls of wisdom there alone as well. And then Tracey, because of course I could talk to you for not even all day today, for many days. So, and I'm aware I'm taking your time here. So in wrapping up, I'm going to ask you, what do you think? There's lots of kind of trends, lots of change happening around measurement and reporting, etc., globally. I'd love to hear from you. What do you think are the trends that people should be watching for in terms of measuring and managing their impact?
Well, I think, the days of writing emotive proposals and people writing big checks are gone. I think those that have money to give for social causes are being asked to be held accountable themselves for, is this money having the change? Could we be more impactful with our money? How do we choose between one opportunity versus another opportunity? And so it's the impact message that's going to get you over the line in terms of that. So if you want to survive as an organization, you're going to have to talk in impact language going forward. And you need to be, continuously ahead of the game in that. Because if you're not, and if the impact story is the last thing you write in your proposal because it was a heading and it's not something that's weaved throughout your proposal, the funders can tell. They can tell whether it's part of your culture or not part of your culture. Because at the end of the day, what's going to happen is you're going to have to report on those measures, and they know that if it's not part of your culture, if it's not weaved into your business processes, there's going to be problems down the line. It's a little bit like your performance appraisal. If performance management is not part of your culture, you set your goals at the end of the year, put them in a bottom drawer, your boss calls for the performance appraisal. Oh gosh, what did I actually do this year? We're just paying lip service. So they can feel that with it's inculcated into that. And I think that's great. I think that's really, really great, because then we're all being held accountable for really, are we making a change in this world? So the other component is negative consequences.
Sure.
I think that's one of the things that was something quite unique that we'd never thought about. One, would this change happen if you weren't here? To ask yourself, because a lot of us claim impact, and but ask yourself, well, if this didn't happen, would this have happened anyway? Is another thing. And then the real hard one to ask is, was there any negative consequence of the work that I did? And a lot of work in the social sector, we think we're always doing good, but sometimes we can actually do bad too. We in the work we do around poverty eradication, if we could claim poverty eradication by doing handouts, okay, we would see a temporary change in a family circumstance. But 3 years down the line, I'm almost certain that family would be more poor, because we hadn't actually capacitated them to eradicate poverty in themselves. So, actually being asked those questions is an important component of this new movement. Well, not new movement, but I think more prominent movement of impact measurement in the world. Whether we'll ever get to a single measurement tool, I think is a noble cause, but I don't think there's any one program that is the same. It's a theory of change. It's unique to that organization, and I think being able to compare it can. I think it's more for understanding than for comparing. Do you know what I mean? Every individual is wanting to make a difference, whether you're the person dispersing the money or the person doing the work on the ground, will want to make that difference based on the legacy they want to leave in the world. And so they need to be able to choose your project based on the legacy they want, and be sure that it is going to deliver the impact they want. And by being transparent about it, it helps them choose. I don't think it helps them. I don't think we should be saying, this one's better than that one. They're all unique. And as long as we're transparent about what changes and how it changes and when it changes, then people can make informed choices. I think the rest is very complex. And I think we would perhaps be sanitizing this whole process. I know there's massive movement towards that, but it's much more complex and challenging than we think to do that.
Absolutely.
In some sectors, I think in other sectors it might be simpler. Certainly in our sector, it's complex.
Yeah. And I think such an important thing that you said as well is always taking it back to learning as well. And also you'd mentioned earlier around learning from other kind of entrepreneurs, etc. And so it's almost viewing it in that lens. It's another way of learning in terms of, if you kind of working towards the same things, but you're seeing different results, what's the curiosity around that? What can you learn from those differences as well?
And sharing. I think we don't do enough sharing. We're all making mistakes all of the time, because these are wicked problems. And if we can use this as a conversation for sharing, there's so much value in that, so that we can fast track certain impact drivers quicker, because we've learned from our mistakes. I think if we try and sanitize it and see it as a scorecard, then it's going to lose its, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but lose its essence. And then people are not going to want to look in the mirror, because it's a scorecard. It's a yes and a no. Not, it's a pass or fail, versus an evolution of a theory that gets refined over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that fear factor is huge. I mean, we even see it in kind of the corporate spaces where there's a real fear around disclosing information. There's sense of we're going to look bad and we're going to be penalized, as opposed to having the freedom to be like, well, this is information that we can actually learn from and now do something with it. And so all of those dynamics are really, really real for people and organizations across the spectrum. So yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. And on that note, Tracey, I would just like to say a huge thank you for taking this time to spend with us. I know I always feel richer and wiser after spending time with you, and today is no different. So thank you again for sharing some of your journey and story. I know it's going to be hugely helpful for others, and we just really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Gabby. Take care.
See you. Bye.